Magic Spoon tastes exactly like your favorite childhood breakfast cereals, but it has no sugar, lots of protein. It's keto and low carb friendly. It's delicious without the guilt. Get $5 off when you click my link below and use the promo code PACMAN. We have some what I would consider potentially good news coming in the Ukraine Russia situation. Now, in this particular case, what we consider good news really depends on one's perspective in the entire conflict. And as many of you know, at odds with what some people believe, both people in my audience and other people who comment on what's going on around the world, I do not see Ukraine as the aggressor. I do not see the responsibility of solving the conflict to be Joe Biden's. I don't see the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO as a legitimate, quote, aggression on the basis of which Vladimir Putin could mass troops at the border, threaten aggression, and if it came to it, actually execute aggression into Ukraine. That's not my perspective. I see that the aggressor massing the troops is the aggressor. And to me, that's calling things what they are. Now, I know many of you have emailed me and you said, well, no, promises were made that NATO wouldn't expand and it would. No, that is a false notion. And we went through that yesterday. In the context of calling things what they are, there are now some statements being made by Russian authorities, which, if true, signal that this is not going to lead to an invasion of Ukraine, which I consider a good thing. CNN reporting. Russia announced that some of its troops would return to base after completing recent drills, but stressed that major military exercises would continue. Ukraine has responded understandably skeptically, saying we'll believe it when we see it. Following the announcement, the U.S. ambassador to NATO said the U.S. will have to verify claims of a potential move towards de-escalation by Russia. Meanwhile, last-ditch Western diplomatic efforts continue, with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Moscow to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. Late Monday, the Kremlin told CNN Putin is willing to negotiate, saying the Ukraine crisis was only one part of Russia's larger security concerns. Now, it can't be ignored that part of the security concerns being claimed by Russia strike me as very insincere, because when you consider the broad claim that NATO involvement in Ukraine is a direct threat to Russia and signals further this, that, or the other thing. The truth is that there have been other countries in the area, including Latvia, where there has been no such escalation. There has been a presence, a Western presence, and there has been no such escalation. And so it's sort of an alleged slippery slope without really a reason to believe that that's going to happen. But listen, I mean, if Putin is genuine, that he's willing to negotiate and back down, I think it's a good thing. And of course, the question with Putin always is this 4D chess? With Trump, we would say, well, when he drew using a Sharpie on the hurricane map, or when he had that insane call with Ukraine, or when he was flushing documents down the toilet, there was this idea it's 4D chess with Trump. He's got something planned and very carefully crafted. No, he didn't. He was a buffoon. There was no 4D chess being played. Things were what they appeared to be. Putin is much smarter than Trump. It's just the reality. And so with Putin, there is the consideration as to, is this 4D chess? And from the beginning, there was the question of, is Putin's real intention to invade or not? And if not, what is the underlying intention here? The Associated Press also reporting Russia ready to discuss confidence building measures. And that article reads, Russian President Putin said Tuesday Moscow is ready for talks with the U.S. and NATO on limits for missile deployments and military transparency in a new sign of easing East-West tensions. The statement came after Russia announced it is pulling back some troops from exercises that raised fears of a potential invasion of Ukraine. The other thing I have a problem with in this entire context are, if you've been watching my show for some time, you are, I'm sure, aware that when someone like me says, hey, this thing Russia's doing isn't good. Hey, this thing China's doing isn't good. This thing Venezuela's doing isn't good. There is a contingent of the left that hears that and says, David, you imperialist bastard, looking to send troops. I don't know why I do the Alex Jones voice, but saying you want the U.S. troops involved everywhere and you want Biden to send it. No, I don't. No, I don't. That's not at all what I want. And in fact, there's really no incentive. As many of you know, I want stability. I want calm, even if it's out of selfish desires for a steady economy, a calm and tranquil stock market. Part of the insanity with 3 consecutive big days of market declines, etc., part of it has been the threat of escalation in Ukraine, Russia. Why would I want that? I don't. So not only is it not, and I'm speaking now not just about myself, but others on the left who point out, hey, we can agree that Putin is the one threatening aggression here, while still not wanting this to escalate and not wanting American troops involved. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And immediately, as of right now, this might change, but the stock market is reacting very favorably to what seem to be decreased tensions in the region. So there is no political reason that I would want American imperialism and sending troops or an escalation. I don't want it. And even if you ignore the fact that it doesn't align with my politics, which have been defaulting to non-intervention in most cases for the United States, both politically and militarily, and that applies to Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, etc., an unfettered record of such positions. Just out of selfish economic concerns, I would also not be incentivized to want those things. So that is my perspective on this. And those who continue to try to attribute some kind of bloodthirsty, hegemonic imperialism to me, it's just not based in anything I've ever said. I think that's the important thing. Let's see what happens in the next 24 hours. This next story is absolutely fascinating. Many of you might remember the name Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell is this kooky lawyer who was, she was working with Trump on the election fraud claims. And then when she got too cartoonish, she was no longer working with Trump per the White House. But then she was seen at the White House and she filed a bunch of these bogus court legal complaints, all of which were thrown out. She is now admitting maybe all that stuff she was saying about the election was not true. Now, I think we really have to approach this with a skeptical eye, maybe even a cynical perspective. Has she really changed her mind, or is she saying this because she is now in such jeopardy because of the things that she did? There's a very interesting Vice News article titled "Sidney Powell Finally Admits That Perhaps the Kraken is Not Real." But it also says, facing disbarment and several billion-dollar lawsuits, the pro-Trump lawyer is kind of changing her story. And I think we have to consider the context here. The admission from Powell came in a brief filed Monday to the U.S. Court of Appeal for the 6th District. It was signed by Powell and fellow lawyer Howard Kleinhendler, filed on behalf of several other Kraken lawyers, though notably not pro-Trump lawyer Lynn Wood, who's also a party. Back in August, you might remember, and we covered this at the time, District Court Judge Linda Parker eviscerated Powell and her team, saying the lawsuit represents a historic and profound abuse of the judicial process. And it does. It's one thing to take on the charge of vindicating rights associated with an allegedly fraudulent election. It is another to take on the charge of deceiving a federal court and the American people into believing rights were infringed without regard to whether any laws or rights were in fact violated. And that is what happened here. Now, Powell, this is fascinating. Powell has argued at the time she was under no obligation to thoroughly research the claims that she made about voter fraud in the lawsuit. She sort of made the case at the time. Listen, people came to me and they said, this is what happened. And it's not up to me to independently verify that that's what the case is. I'm just the lawyer here, which the judge does not agree with, and it makes absolutely no sense. In this week's filing, Powell and Kleinhendler casually admit everything they had been saying may not actually be true, but because lots of people were saying it at the time, they decided to include it. Quote, millions of Americans believe the central contentions of the complaint to be true, and perhaps they are, admitting she's no longer actually confident about the veracity of those claims. Now, I think it's important to ask the question, does she believe all of these wacky election claims are true, but she's backing off because of the legal problems that she's now having? Did she never believe the claims were true, or did she believe them and she has since changed her mind? Legally speaking, I don't know that it makes a difference. As a reminder, here are some of the wacky things that this woman said.
The amount of evidence that this election was completely fraudulent and that Joe Biden is a fraudulent president is beyond overwhelming.
Now, understand that if we are to believe her current statement, what she meant when she said that was, the people I'm working with told me this, but I don't really know it to be true. That's what she now says. Listen, we were told these things. We didn't independently confirm them. Here's another Sidney Powell clip.
So I don't know where to go next because this is like something out of a movie. So the Department of Defense, let's review. 2006, a patent coming from the Department of Defense that allows for an algorithm that can flip and change votes. The patent was transferred to...
I love the reference to an algorithm. Ow. It's an algorithm.
It can predetermine, that algorithm can predetermine the outcome of an election. It's specifically to create a predetermined outcome.
Okay, so maybe she believed that to be true at the time, or again, maybe that's just what some of the people she was working with told her. Here's another one about a secret server.
What I think really has to be discovered is that there is a secret server that all the votes go to where they manipulate the heck out of it.
Now, did she believe that at the time, or was that also just something people were telling her? And here's one last one with this wacky guy, Stu Peters.
That for at least 20 years now, somebody other than the voters of the United States of America has been determining certain elections. And this year, if not prior years, it happened to be the presidency of the United States of America.
Now, did she believe that at the time? Or again, was it just, we were told that stuff and we didn't investigate it? So Sidney Powell now saying, we don't really know that any of that stuff was true. It's just what we were told, by plaintiffs. She's really potentially in trouble here. And I think that's all that's going on. Let me know your thoughts. Find me on Twitter at dpacman. It is a brand new year. Maybe you have goals around getting in better shape, maybe cutting back on sugar. That's why you should check out our longtime sponsor, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon tastes exactly like the delicious sweet breakfast cereals you loved as a kid, but Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net carbs. So it's perfect if you're doing low carb or keto, or if, like me, you just try to limit your sugar intake. You can build your own variety pack with flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cinnamon, cookies and cream, waffle maple, blueberry. That's my favorite. Magic Spoon lets you enjoy a sweet, delicious snack without the guilt. You can stick to your goals and still treat yourself. And if you don't love Magic Spoon as much as I do, they'll give you all of your money back, no questions asked. Magic Spoon is giving my audience $5 off when you go to magicspoon.com/Pacman and use the promo code Pacman. The David Pacman Show depends on the support of listeners and viewers like you. We have a membership program at joinpacman.com. We do an extra show every day for our members, and you can use the coupon code WOW22 to save big off of the price of a membership at joinpacman.com. There is a very rapidly growing in concern movement among the Republican Party about how to get control of the party back in advance of the 22 midterms and certainly in advance of the 2024 Republican presidential primary. Now, you might be saying, well, get control back from who? Or you might understand that the question is about getting control back from Donald Trump. And there are a number of interesting articles about this that have come out over the last 24 hours. One such article in the Washington Post reports about clashes between Republican leaders and the candidates that Trump has embraced, and that these clashes have been playing out around the country. A chaotic sign that Trump's once unchallenged hold on the party and rank and file supporters is waning, even by degrees. And I think at this point we have to say Trump's control over the party is waning, but only to a degree. In other words, we see that the number of Republicans, the percentage of Republicans that want Trump to run again is lower, but it's still not low. It's still above 50% of Republicans at last check. But interestingly, the Washington Post writes, the former president's power within the party and his continued focus on personal grievances is increasingly being questioned behind closed doors at Republican gatherings, according to interviews with more than a dozen prominent Republicans in Washington and across the country, including some Trump advisors. Not surprisingly, many spoke on the condition of anonymity because there remains significant fear of attracting Trump's public wrath. Also being reported by Business Insider on the basis of the Washington Post report, Republican leaders are holding closed-door meetings to question Trump's power over the party, report says. Now, I think it's an important reminder to tell you guys, questioning Trump's power is very different than questioning Trumpism or the sweeping authoritarian slide that the Republican Party experienced under Trump. But we'll get to that in a moment. Discontent with Trump is growing among some Republican leaders. Senior Republicans are questioning Trump's hold over the party in meetings. Some Republicans reportedly think Trump's fixation with election fraud could cost them in elections. I think the same thing, and I'm hoping that it happens. I think that there's a few different things to talk about here. First of all, it's sort of like 6 years too late in the sense that we would be living not in a different country, but on a different planet had Republicans had these meetings previously. Now, they kind of did have these meetings early on in the Republican primary, and ultimately their voters chose Trump anyway. Now, could the Republican Party have done more to prevent Trump from having become the nominee in 2016? Yes, they could have done more, but it's possible that because, the issue with the Republican electorate is that it's a monster of their own creation. They attacked education for decades. They abandoned issues increasingly and focused on cultural issues and talking points and this sort of thing. And what that led to in 2016 was a monster that they couldn't even control. Could they have turned the ship around once it was summer of 2016? I don't know. I don't know if they could have. The other, at the same time, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If the Republican Party is deciding it wants out of Trump, okay, they didn't do it 6 years ago, but they can start doing it now. The bigger issue here is that even if it's not in their best interests to have Trump represent the party publicly, it doesn't mean that they want to abandon the authoritarian, non-thinking, reactionary slide that the party experienced under Donald Trump. They're not questioning Trump's authoritarianism. They're not questioning Trump's disdain for media and a free press. They're not questioning any of that. The meetings are about, is it good for the face of the party to be Trump doing rallies, complaining about the election he lost 15 months ago? It's about the particular person that is out there speaking prominently as the face of the Republican Party. And in fact, I would say the opposite. They've become enamored over the last 6 years with this kind of harebrained brand of authoritarianism. And it's evident in that so many of them are now talking about Ron DeSantis and falling in line behind DeSantis. DeSantis is just as authoritarian as Trump. He's more competent than Trump, which could make him potentially more dangerous and effective as well. So this is not a Republican reaction saying we've got to get away from this authoritarianism and get back to issues. They're not saying that at all. They're not saying, wow, we've really tried to end even the facade of democracy over the last couple of, they're all about all of that stuff. They are just worried that Trump at the helm is not best for them from a strategic point of view. They may be right about that, but they don't seem to be concerned with the actual direction of the party. They just want someone else at the head of the party. So what effect will this have in November of 2022? We just don't know yet. And Donald Trump at this point, I don't think has more rallies scheduled, but there's been talk about, will he go to Colorado in support of Lauren Boebert, one of the most weaponized and dangerous results of Trumpism in the House of Representatives? What is Donald Trump going to be doing in general between now and the November election? We will talk a little bit later about one particular thing that he's doing, which is backing big lie supporters in positions of election administration, which is exactly what he said he would do, and he's doing it. We're going to get back to that. But it could be a very interesting matchup here between anti-Trump Republicans and Trump going into the midterms. What can we hope for as people on the left? Let's hope it just messes them up and limits the degree to which Republicans win in November, if at all. And of course, we're going to try to work on the if at all piece and avoid losing the House and Senate, but remains to be seen. This is a very interesting kind of final point on the Sarah Palin defamation lawsuit. If you haven't been following this story, good for you. I mean, quite frankly, good for you. Former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, who was John McCain's vice presidential running mate in 2008, sort of like a precursor. She was Trump before Trump, just cartoony ignorance. And she sued the New York Times. She filed a defamation lawsuit against the New York Times in which she said the New York Times defamed her by linking her politics and her rhetoric with real world shootings. And Sarah Palin sued, arguing that it was defamation. Now, the trial was delayed, you might remember, because Sarah Palin caught COVID. Then she was spotted eating out at restaurants in New York City while COVID positive. I mean, just a gross, vile woman. But the big news is that a judge has thrown the lawsuit out. And somehow Fox News is still calling it a victory. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit. CNN reporting. Judge Jed Rakoff, the judge overseeing Sarah Palin's defamation suit, said Monday he will dismiss the suit, ruling Palin's team did not prove a key element of the case. Rakoff's ruling came while the jury was already deliberating. Rakoff said he will allow the jury to continue deliberating and to reach a verdict, and then will dismiss the case. Rakoff presented his findings, a very clear win for the New York Times, with an eye towards an inevitable appeals process. The judge said Palin did not prove actual malice, which is the standard her legal team had to meet in a defamation case. This goes back to the 1964 case, New York Times v. Sullivan, which specifies if you're a public figure and you sue for defamation, you have to prove that the offender knew the claim was false or showed reckless disregard for the truth. The Times said all along it made an error involving Palin. They issued a correction, but Palin argued the publication smeared her on purpose. Seemed like a big uphill battle to prove that, and Rakoff has now sided with the Times and said Palin's camp did not present a legally sufficient evidentiary basis, calling it unfortunate editorializing. So this is being dismissed. This is a loss for Sarah Palin. Fox News, which operates in opposite world, is calling it a win. Here's Martha McCallum, breaking news, interviewing Howard Kurtz. And Howard Kurtz says, well, it sort of is a win, though. I mean, take a listen to this.
Pardon me? Oh, Howie, don't go away. I've got another question for you, because we actually are just covering something that is breaking moments ago. And I mentioned this to Jeanine Pirro, and her jaw dropped. The judge has thrown out Sarah Palin's case.
Yeah. Judge Jeanine Pirro was just shocked at the judge's decision.
Against the New York Times, which was saying that they had defamed her by suggesting that her PAC had something to do with the shooting and killing of 6 people, including the injuring of Gabby Giffords. What's your reaction to this news?
Well, first of all, I think that Sarah Palin won this case in the court of public opinion in that a lot of
no, she didn't. What are you talking about, Howie?
Very damaging material to the New York Times came out about this editorial accusing her of political incitement in a mass shooting in Arizona 6 years earlier, and has not made the New York Times look good. But it has always been the case that it would be very difficult for the former governor to win this suit because she's a public figure and there's a Supreme Court standard about having to prove malice or reckless disregard. What I don't completely understand...
I love how in this case they act as if the law as written is like a technicality that's just inconvenient for Sarah Palin, even though like her claims are completely true. This is all the time they say, this is the law, this is the standard, we respect the law. And he's saying, yeah, based on the law, it's not defamation, but he's acting like it's some kind of unfair technicality, but really Sarah Palin won.
Because this is just breaking, is why the judge would send the case to the jury, then say, well, she hasn't proven the case as a matter of law. And apparently, according to what we're being told from the courthouse, allowing the jury to continue to deliberate. But if the judge has made this ruling, that means, barring an appeal, at least this phase of the case is over for Sarah Palin. But man, I think that she did a lot to shine a light on the internal processes of the New York Times, and it has been pretty ugly.
She really didn't, actually. And it is just, you know, understand, the people that are getting their news from this, they're hearing Sarah Palin was right and she basically won. But the judge did something weird, and so like, I guess no, the New York Times isn't going to have to pay. But she basically won. That's not what happened. The case was dismissed. The case is being dismissed.
You got some of the folks from the New York Times to admit that they had made mistakes, to apologize for, you know, presenting things that were not as they appear, you know, differently than the underlying facts.
Even that's not really true, because the New York Times had already issued a correction. Like, every aspect of this is just not true. But you have to remember, who is the audience here? The audience believes now Sarah Palin basically won the case. I mean, okay, legally she didn't. And that's the only case there is. But she basically won the case. This is how Fox News works. And you have to remember, this is the hard news hour of Fox News. But what's being mentioned here is just opinion. And it happens to be opinion that doesn't make any sense. If you're just listening to the podcast today, we'll have the clip from Fox that I played on our Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. One of the things we've learned, if we've learned anything over the last few years, is that when they say they're going to do something, we should assume that they're telling the truth. And a great example of this is in the lead up to the 2020 election, all of the talk about the ballots can't be trusted, the absentee ballots can't be trusted, vote by mail, it's all a scam, it's all corrupt, it's all lending itself to fraud. They were telling us what they were going to say after the election. And at 2 a.m., 2:15 a.m. Eastern time, whatever it was, on the night of the 2020 election, Trump came out and said he won, and then immediately started casting doubt into the absentee ballots. And we know what the story is. They're still telling that lie, and roughly half of Republicans have been convinced of that. And so when a couple of months ago, Donald Trump told us, we are going to be supporting the right people to run the elections in 2022 and 2024. And I told you, they're telling us what they're going to do. They're putting people in place so that instead of, you know, Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, who said, I'm not going to find you the 11,000 votes you need because you didn't win, not going along with it. Instead of a Brad Raffensperger, they'll have someone who's compliant and someone who's going to go with it. And that is exactly what is starting up right now. The Guardian reports, alarm as Trump backs big lie candidates for key election posts in Michigan. It's almost a non-story in the sense that they said they were going to do it. It was obvious they were going to do it, and now they're doing it. A Trumpist takeover of the battleground state is raising eyebrows over concerns of the end of free and fair elections. Remember, this was Trump just about a month ago.
To be a lot sharper the next time when it comes to counting the vote. There's a famous statement, sometimes the vote counter is more important than the candidate, and we can't let that ever happen again. They have to get tougher and smarter.
So he told us that they were going to do it, and they are doing it. Trump and his allies are backing numerous candidates in the coming midterm elections across the U.S., including in other vital states like Arizona and Georgia. But his intervention in Michigan raises particular eyebrows due to its role in helping Trump to win 2016 before flipping back to Democrats in 2020. The former U.S. president and his close ally, Mike Lindell, the MyPillow CEO, are giving strong backing to a Michigan lawyer and key promoter of debunked election fraud charges who is seeking the Republican nod to be the state's next attorney general. Trump plans to hold a fundraiser for Matthew DePerno on March 8th at his Florida Mar-a-Lago club, where Lindell told The Guardian he will speak to boost DePerno's chances to be the Republican to take on the Democratic Attorney General Dana Nessel. Christina Caramo, a community college professor who also peddled conspiracy theories about election fraud and who has never held elected office, has received Trump's backing to be the Republican Secretary of State candidate to challenge incumbent Democrat Jocelyn Benson in the fall elections. These positions matter for 2024's vote count. As The Guardian points out, the Secretary of State plays a crucial role in overseeing elections. Trump loyalists are investing heavily to capture several of these posts this year. And early this month, Trump spoke at a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago for the gubernatorial campaign of conservative commentator and businesswoman Tudor Dixon, who has backed a vaguely defined forensic audit. Remember, we never really know what it means to do a forensic audit. It sounds, so you want to review the ballots? And then Trump goes, no, well, the ballots are the problem. We got to go deeper. Well, what are you talking about? Trump called Dixon very special. He's not yet made an official endorsement. She's one of 12 Republicans who want to be the next governor. This is exactly what they have planned for 2024. And this is one of the major reasons why Donald Trump will be involved in 2022. He's saying it out loud. We don't yet know whether he's going to run in 2024, but no matter whether Trump does or doesn't run, they are going to try again. And we know the techniques. We know all of the techniques at this point. And as I've said before, one of the problems when you're playing defense against such aggressive, horrible people who are willing to do anything, at the end of the day, they're willing to do anything, is they only need to be slightly more prepared than you on one of these areas, right? You've got voter fraud claims and dozens of lawsuits and criminal court complaints, the possibility of getting a vice president to try to send things back to the states, trying to get states to send alternate slates of electors. They have all these different techniques, state of emergency idea, and you've got to play defense on all of them. And if you're not there on every single one of those methods, it's conceivable that they could get away with it. It's hopefully still not likely, but it's conceivable. And remember, if the military had been with him in 2020, could the coup have worked? We don't know. But retired military generals have said, you've got to be really careful about that because we believe it could have been a possibility that Trump might have had a better shot at staying in power if the military brass supported him. Fortunately, they didn't. If Raffensperger had been willing in Georgia, could it maybe have worked? Could it maybe have given him Georgia and then justified who knows what else in other states? I don't know. But there is no doubt about where this is heading. And it is very scary. And, when we read the piece from the Canadian political scientist, I believe his name's Thomas Homer Dixon, saying the U.S. could be a dictatorship by 2030. When we read about all these things, I understand, just like for you, I am both desensitized because of the insanity of the last 6 years, and some part of me doesn't really want to believe that something like that could happen. But the right is doing everything that they can and everything they can think of to give themselves the possibility of just choosing who becomes president, regardless of who gets the most votes. And so ignore this stuff at our own peril. I think, is the cautionary tale that we must remember. A bunch of you sent me articles about this next story, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, but it should be extraordinarily alarming because of what it means. The accounting firm, which has represented Trump's business for a decade, is now saying, we can't trust, you can't trust, David Pakman, I can't trust the financial accounting records that they put together for the last decade because they may be based on underlying fraudulent information. And the accounting firm has abandoned Trump and says they will no longer represent Trump's business. This is unbelievable. Yahoo News, NBC News reporting Trump Organization's accounting firm says it can no longer vouch for financial statements from the company. This is a major story, and it is not getting the attention it deserves. The accounting firm Mazars USA said a decade's worth of financial statements from the Trump Organization can no longer be viewed as reliable, according to a letter made public Monday by New York Attorney General Letitia James as part of her civil probe into Trump's company. Mazars also said it will no longer work with the Trump Organization, meaning the company may have to get new financial statements that could complicate its ability to secure loans. In a February 9 letter from Mazars Group General Counsel William Kelly to the Trump Organization's chief legal officer, the auditing firm said its work from 2011 to 2020, quote, should not be relied upon. In the world of corporate accounting, this is like a groundbreaking statement of there's some really bad stuff going on here, and we, meaning the accounting firm, want to try to get the hell out from under what might be coming in our direction. They also added, we write to advise that the statements of financial condition for Donald J. Trump for the years ending June 30th, 2011 to June 30th, 2020, that's fiscal years, should no longer be relied upon, and you should inform any recipients thereof currently relying upon one or more of those documents that those documents should not be relied upon. Understand that that is a signal to all of the lenders that have given Trump money on the basis of these financial statements. They're being told, you made financial decisions about the Trump Organization's creditworthiness on the basis of accounting documents that we, the accounting firm, are telling you cannot be relied upon. Here's a copy of the letter sent out. Dear Alan, this is to Alan Garten, the chief legal officer of the Trump Organization, and from the accounting firm. Dear Alan, it's like a Dear John letter. We write to advise that the statement of financial condition for Donald J. Trump from 2011 to 2020 should no longer be relied upon, and you should inform recipients relying on those not to. We have come to this conclusion. This is the best part. We have come to this conclusion based in part upon the filings made by the New York Attorney General on January 18th, 2022, our own investigation, and information received from internal and external sources. They are saying, in part, the investigation being carried out by Letitia James of New York has brought to their attention the corruption and alleged fraud, potential fraud, I want to be careful with how I say that, committed by the Trump Organization. And we already know what this relates to. This mostly seems to relate to the valuation of assets. What Michael Cohen and others have told us the Trump Organization would regularly do is you take a building. Let's say we agree that in the real world, the building is worth $20 million. When it comes to assessment for tax purposes, the Trump Organization would say, look at this crappy building. It's not worth $20 million. It's worth $10 million. So tax us on the $10 million valuation. And they would submit documents supporting that that's what it's worth. On the other hand, when the Trump Organization wanted to get a loan using that same building as collateral, they would say, listen, this building's not worth $10 million. This building's not worth $20 million. This building's worth $40 million. And so you can give us, if it's an 80% loan to value or whatever the case is, you can give us a loan on the basis that the collateral we're offering you is worth 30 or $40 million rather than 20. And that would encourage a lender to say, we can give them $28 million because if they default, we take the building and we sell the building for 30 or 40. When the building's only worth 10 or 20, giving a $28 million loan with that building as collateral obviously is not a good idea for the lender. So that's the gist of what has been done. Other notes from the letter. Due in part to our decision regarding the financial statements as well as the totality of the circumstances, we have reached the point such that there is a non-waivable conflict of interest with the Trump organization. As a result, we are not able to provide any new work product to the Trump organization. This is an example of rats abandoning a sinking ship, and it's crimes all the way down. And consider that Trump was elected partially on the basis that he was a really successful entrepreneur. And then we found out, well, he's had a bunch of business bankruptcies, but he said that was him just using the tax code to his advantage. This additional thing suggests that even the degree to which his business was successful was based upon accounting distortions, or at least potentially on that basis. And when I hear you can't trust these accounting documents and we're not working for you anymore, what I hear is we committed fraud for the boss and we're going to get caught and we're doing what we can to wash our hands of him. And I think anybody who knows anything about Trump knows that cutting corners is sort of the name of the game. It's the status quo. And people continue to love the guy and defend the guy, but this is not looking good at all in terms of this investigation into the Trump organization. Will it ever hit Trump? I still don't think so. And I know many of you get mad when I say that, but I don't think so. Let me know if you have a different view on that particular piece. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Let's start now with some of the kind of last gasps of obvious 2020 election delusion. I'm going to talk to you about the term decertification. Now, some of you will already know where this is going. In the United States, once states certify an election, there is no legal provision to then decertify that election. And even if a state figured out some way to decertify an election, if Arizona now said, hey, we're decertifying our election from November of 2022, it still wouldn't remove the sitting president of the United States. You'd need to remove the sitting president, either through invoking the 25th Amendment and the process that goes there, or through impeachment. And even if you did that, the vice president would assume the position. So there is no such thing as decertification in the way that some people have been claiming it exists. MyPillow CEO, Mike Lindell, known to us as MyPillow, he is still talking about election decertification. And in fact, he appeared yesterday on the Stephen Bannon show called The War Room. Stephen Bannon is a former Trump advisor, former Breitbart propagandist, and he has been hosting Pillow for a while now. And Pillow's new thing is he now has elected officials supporting multiple decertifications. It's happening imminently, guys. Imminently, this is going to happen. Take a look at this and ask yourself the question, does Pillow believe this, or is he just giving fodder to the last people that still believe this stuff?
Well, Arizona, that was over a week ago now. They've got quite a few representatives and senators that signed on. We're getting more and more every day. I was in Wisconsin, and all they need there, I was over there with the great Tim Rathbun. He is the senator that put the bill before to has it ready to decertify Wisconsin.
No, he doesn't, Pillow.
It was an amazing event. I was there 5 hours. I planned on being there for a half hour, but there was Wisconsin. They're all over Wisconsin.
Right, the lies were so compelling. He stayed 5 hours.
To go, hey, we have the evidence. Let's get this decertified. I met some other senators and representatives, Steve. They're this close to getting on board. I believe we can get them all to jump on together because a lot of them still live in fear. They're going, fear, or they're not. They were very, a lot of them just to be educated on this, that a lot of them said, well, there's nothing that can be done anyway. Absolutely there can be done. That we've had lawyers, constitutional lawyers, look at this. 3 of these states you decertify, and then it goes back to all the states, and it votes one person or one state, one vote, and it's Republican controlled.
That is a complete and total lie. I mean, understand that this is not, aside from whether there's the willingness to do this, aside from whether there's the interest of doing this, aside from whether there's any empirical evidentiary support for doing, put all of that aside. Even if it happened, it doesn't go back to where each state gets to cast one vote about who becomes president of the United States. It's a fantasy.
So this is very real, and it's manifesting.
No.
It's coming to fruition, and it's going to happen, Steve.
Now understand that Pillow has made an entire sequence of predictions. In November of 2020, he said by December it would be flipped to Trump. In December, he said that in time for January 6th, it would be flipped to Trump. On January 7th or 8th, he said by the time of the inauguration, it will be flipped to Trump. After that, he said March, April. Then it got pushed to the summer, then the end of summer. Then in August, he said it would be by October. And then he said it's going to be by Thanksgiving. And then it's going to be by the end of the year. And it's 2022, guys, and it's not happening. Now, we are almost at the next election. We're almost at the midterms. Everything that he says in this clip about what could happen and how things would happen is a lie. I don't know whether Pillow even believes this stuff. I highly doubt Bannon believes this stuff. And the idea here is Wisconsin and Arizona will decertify the wins of Joe Biden 15, 16 months ago. Now, to take it seriously for a second, this has been studied. There is no legal basis to decertify a U.S. presidential election. There is no provision in the Constitution to decertify a presidential election. To remove a sitting president, you need, they die, okay, then goes to the VP. You have the invocation of the 25th Amendment. If a president is unable to discharge the powers of office, you have a conviction on impeachment. You have a resignation. Okay. In all of these situations, the vice president becomes the president. You don't go to a candidate who lost 15 months ago. Constitutional experts have talked about, we've now talked about the Electoral Count Act many times, and it provides the process for certifying the presidential election. It doesn't have a provision for decertification. And it's almost like these guys like Pillow and others think any process that exists can be run in reverse. It's almost like hitting a rewind button on a VCR. It's not true. And even if a state were to undo its certification, it would have no legal significance whatsoever. So these people are in a fantasy world. I don't know whether they believe it. Maybe you have some kind of sense. All right, I want to go through something that's just, it's so crass and it's so emblematic, I guess I would say, of the kind of vapid and coarse nature of the modern Republican Party. Radical Republic. If you say to me, David, sir, who are the 3 sort of most cartoonish clowns in the House of Representatives right now? I would say, well, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's Madison Cawthorn, and it's Lauren Boebert. And then after that, there's a lot of candidates. You know, it could be Matt Gaetz, Louis Gohmert, very, very long list. But certainly in the top 3, as I hit my microphone here and almost damage it, Lauren Boebert would certainly be in the top 3. Lauren Boebert has been given the Hottest Woman in Congress award by one of these right-wing channels. And the award misspelled her name and included a gift card to Red Lobster, to the seafood chain Red Lobster. If you were to satirize the modern Republican Party on a show like Saturday Night Live, you would create a hottest woman in Congress award, misspell the recipient's name, and include a gift card to like Arby's or Red Lobster or something like that. It's exactly what you would do. Let's take a look at this. If you look at her holding the award, you see that her name had been spelled Lauren Boebert with an A, B-A-R-T, and then sort of corrected. Honestly, it looks like a Sharpie to be Lauren Boebert with an E, or Boebert, as Congressman Ro Khanna referred to her. And there's a gift card in there, and that gift card is to Red Lobster, and it's in the amount of $27.43, which I guess the point there is you, as a member of Congress, you violate some ethics laws if you accept a gift worth more than $50. So I guess that's how they came up with $27.43. Here is her being told by Jesse Kelly, who knows who these people are, about the award.
Joining me now, the first winner of the Jesse Kelly Show Hottest Woman in Congress list, Congresswoman from Colorado, Lauren Boebert. Congresswoman, first and foremost, before we get to all the news of the day, I want to congratulate you on such a high achievement and hope you got our certificate. I see you did get our certificate, and I want to make sure you also got the gift card we sent along with it.
I got it. Look at that, Jesse. How's that?
That's outstanding. Outstanding.
And Jesse, I do think that $27.43 is under the gift limits, but if we check with ethics and it's over, this is coming right back to you.
Yes, ma'am. I understand that. We're going to do the best we can to up that to 30 next year, depending on how the show does. But moving forward, the second hottest woman in Congress, she was the runner-up this year, AOC, went on Twitter and whined once again like she always.
Yeah. Trump's flushing documents down the toilet. Boebert is getting misspelled hottest woman in Congress award. If this is a simulation, someone has a very interesting sense of humor. And I think the important thing here is I keep going back. We talk about how do we engage with these people? How do you talk sense into folks who believe the things that people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others say? Is it just a matter of having a few conversations with them or whatever? I never want to say that people, generally speaking, are too far gone. But you have to understand that there's sort of like a culture of ignorance and anti-intellectualism and a sort of pride in lacking any sophistication or depth in one's thinking. And, Lauren Boebert getting the hottest woman award and it's been misspelled. It's not the be-all, end-all of reminding us about that reality right now among this right-wing American political movement and the fact that this is how unsophisticated and anti-intellectual they are. But it's just a reminder that this movement is so pervasive. And I'm reminded of this, whenever I go to a conservative state and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of, some fair or whatever the case may be, I'm reminded there's nobody who could come here and just talk sense into these people in any real way. And that's what gets us to, we just have to get voter turnout up. We have to just overwhelm them with numbers because most of them are not going to be convinced. We've got to fix education so we prevent people from becoming this uninformed in the first place. It is a colossal task that we are faced with in this country. And this is just a little microcosm of that really epitomizes how you can't distinguish between how these right-wingers would be satirized on skit and comedy programs and what they actually are. There's essentially no daylight between those two things anymore. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a caller who always leaves very trollish questions, but there's actually some meaty sort of substance here to talk about. Let's play it, and then we'll discuss.
A real question with real substance.
Please.
Should Big Pharma pay for the education of doctors since all of their doctors basically push their pharmaceuticals?
Right.
I don't see them pushing vitamins, minerals, nutrition, good food, healthy food, unprocessed foods, ultra-processed foods. All that stuff is bad for you. But they push pharmaceuticals. Please answer that question.
Okay, so the caller is sort of confused. Now, what I have to assume that what the caller means by should pharmaceutical companies be allowed to educate doctors, I assume what they mean is that pharmaceutical companies send their own reps to tell doctors about medications and how they work. And it is sales. It is essentially saying to doctors, here's a great medication for conditions, prescribe this. I assume that that's what the caller is talking about. And that entire infrastructure is very problematic in the United States. We also have I believe it's the US and New Zealand, I think, the only two countries where you can directly market medications to consumers through media. Like you see ads on TV, ask your doctor about this medication or that medication. That's a major problem. Now, that being said, I think there are more and more doctors who are talking, generally speaking, about the importance of a good and healthy diet, understanding just basics about nutrition, undoing bad or flawed ideas. I know many doctors in many specialties who talk to me about, they try to have conversations with patients that are much more general about lifestyle. And so I don't think it's fair to say that doctors aren't doing that. I do think that, unfortunately, particularly when you look at specialists tend to be dealing with disease in a way where you have to use the tools available at the time. And so if someone comes in and they have, skin cancer, or they already have diabetes, of course you talk about lifestyle, and you should generally wear sunscreen when you go out in the sun, and you should eat a healthy diet in order to improve the diabetes. But you also have to deal with the situation as it is, and sometimes that includes medication or surgical interventions or whatever the case may be. But I don't find this question to be, this guy calls in and always says I'm a troll and I'm asking trolling questions. I think there's some confusion in the caller, but I think that there is no question that doctors are understanding these kind of structural and systemic factors and the importance of a healthy lifestyle and all of that. At the tail end of it, there's this very kind of pernicious thing where, there are conditions that are very much lifestyle related. And if everybody did, quote, what they were supposed to do, you would almost put some specialists out of business, because all of a sudden you reduce the number of people with that condition. I get that. I get that a lot of money is made treating conditions that are preventable in many cases. And that's a conversation we've also had, but it's a little bit different than what the caller is asking. We have a great bonus show for you today. More and more Democrats are getting anxious about Joe Biden just getting the replacement on the court for Stephen Breyer sooner than later. And we're going to talk about that. There is a Jewish student who was reprimanded for exposing that students did a Nazi salute in class. It wasn't the students doing the salute who were reprimanded. It was the Jewish student who blew the whistle. What? We'll talk about that on today's bonus show. And also, we're going to talk about the organic cotton movement. And we will talk about what does organic cotton mean? And we're going to talk about scams within that movement as well. Very disturbing marketing thing that is going on. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Don't miss it. Get instant access by signing up at joinpacman.com. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Magic Spoon tastes exactly like your favorite childhood breakfast cereals, but it has no sugar, lots of protein. It's keto and low carb friendly. It's delicious without the guilt. Get $5 off when you click my link below and use the promo code PACMAN.